Welcome to Best Life Ever, the podcast with your hosts, time and energy coaches, Kimi and Pua. Here at Best Life Ever, we are on a mission to expand the way people think, work, and live in today's modern world. Today, we have an interview with the coolest guy.
Oh my God, he's so cool. We actually, we spent a fair amount of time really like hardcore stalking Andy Molinsky. Andy, we love you, and we are super, super pumped to share you with our audience. For those of you who don't know Andy, he is a professor at Brandeis University, their international business school, with a joint appointment in the Department of Psychology. Andy received his PhD in organizational behavior and an MA in psychology from Harvard. He also holds a master's degree in international affairs from Columbia University and a BA in international affairs from Brown University. Holy moly, this guy's smart. Andy's work helps people develop the insights and courage necessary to act outside their personal and cultural comfort zones when doing important but challenging tasks in work and in life.
Yes, we enjoyed our conversation with Andy so much. He is a prolific researcher and writer, and he shared with us a lot of the information and thoughts from his new book called Reach, which is all about getting out of your comfort zone. And it was just really mind-blowing and so fun. He's so easy to talk to, and we just know you're going to love this conversation that we found really, really valuable.
Definitely check out Andy Molinsky on all the social media platforms and listen in. We're super excited. Here is our interview with Andy.
Hi, Andy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on. I'm happy to be here.
We're so excited to have you. And we'd love to just kick things off by having you share a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. I'm a professor at Brandeis University's International Business School, which is in Boston, and also in the psychology department. I have been here for quite a while now, but as of probably about, 7 or 8 years ago, I made a significant transition myself, and I started writing for business audiences. I started writing for Harvard Business Review and Inc.com and Psychology Today, and I wrote my first book, Global Dexterity, which is sort of a popular book, and then I just wrote this book, Reach, and I do a lot of, workshops and companies and coaching and training and all sorts of stuff. So I kind of have two lives, sort of my academic university life and then my outside life. And I'm very interested in helping people understand the challenges of stepping outside their comfort zones and how to overcome those challenges.
Wow, that's so amazing. We spent some time digging through your website and kind of stalking you a little bit. We hope you don't mind. And we're just you have such a cool take on really life, right? And as Best Life Ever, we just really were fascinated by your approach to stepping out of your comfort zone and letting that be kind of the focus in anything that you want to do. And we're so excited to hear a little bit more about your thoughts on that and what maybe you can talk about your book a little bit. But just what about stepping out of your comfort zone was so transformative for you? And why do you feel that that's something to share with the world?
Yeah, so that's of course like the irony, or maybe not even the irony, but just like, I wrote this book and I'm some supposed expert on stepping outside your comfort zone, but like I'm no expert. I mean, I struggle stepping outside my comfort zone all the time and always have. And, in fact, I think that's part of what inspired me to write the book. I was the student in college who would sit at the back of the room, terrified to say anything, my heart kind of beating out of my chest. After college, I might be afraid to walk into a networking event, definitely, or make small talk with people I don't know, giving public speeches. Like nowadays, I do that all the time. It's just part of what I do in companies and in a university and so on. But 20 years ago, I was terrified to speak in public, really like legitimately terrified to do it. So it's been something I've struggled with my whole life. My first book, Global Dexterity, which I published in 2013, that was about stepping outside your cultural comfort zone. And what was interesting is I got such feedback from that book, lots of nice positive notes from people saying, hey, these ideas are kind of broader than just your cultural comfort zone. You should consider writing something and trying to help people step outside their comfort zone in general. And so kind of those two threads kind of really inspired me, and that's I think what brought me to this book.
Very cool. Yeah, we always say, right? We teach what we need to learn. I think Pua and I talk about that all the time, that we became fascinated with productivity, time, and energy simply because we were so darn busy all the time and feeling really overwhelmed. And so as we teach, we learn, and it's just, it's beautiful the way it works out like that. And so can you talk a little bit more about what it means to step out of your comfort zone? I think that, we hear people talk about that so much, like get out of your comfort zone. It's almost become like a cultural meme now, right? To just push out of that comfort zone. But it's almost like sometimes we don't even know if we're in a comfort zone or not. So can you share a little bit about what that looks like, or maybe what that feels like?
Yeah, so I totally agree with you, by the way, about the meme. Like that was one of the very first things I did when I started researching the book. I did a Google image on comfort zones, and you find people jumping out of planes and jumping off bridges, and, sort of inspirational posters like, life begins at the edge of your comfort zone, or nothing good ever happens in a comfort zone, and so on. And, by the way, I don't believe that. I don't believe that, and I certainly hope that people listening don't, say, gosh, I have to step outside my comfort zone in every situation. I mean, that sounds like overwhelming. And of course it is. Unless you're like a massive adrenaline junkie or something, there's no way you're going to do that. But so what a comfort zone is a comfort zone is really where you feel very little anxiety, lots of mastery, lots of confidence. You've mastered whatever it is, or it might be a routine that you're in, and it's just easy and simple for you. Now, the reason that you would want to step outside your comfort zone, and there's a difference, of course, between what I call a comfort zone, kind of your stretch zone, and then your panic zone. And you can sort of chart that along how much anxiety would be at every stage, right? So in your comfort zone, there's very little anxiety. And so also, by the way, what's in my comfort zone might not be in yours, right? So it's very personal. And then in your stretch zone, that's where there is a bit of anxiety, but it's not overwhelming. And that's where, by the way, I suggest people go first, to your kind of something that's a stretch, as opposed to your panic zone. And that would be something that is just totally, completely overwhelming. And, I think that's a really hard leap to make. And I do not recommend people, do that typically. Like if you're terrified of public speaking, don't go off and do a TED Talk right away. try to build up to that, right? I guess you guys are in Hawaii. I imagine, if you're surfing, it's the same thing, right? You don't go and find the biggest, hardest waves. You want to start small and work your way up. And it's the same thing with stepping outside your comfort zone as well.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's so cool to think of it with that visual. I almost see like a target kind of image.
Yeah.
And it's kind of ripples out, right?
Yeah.
I love that. And I'm so fascinated also by kind of the growth factor of all of this, right? So, we have a lot of listeners who are also in transition and are kind of thinking about things that truly scare them, right? And again, that's that cultural meme thing where it's like, oh, if it scares you, it's probably worth doing, and all of those things. And it's really cool to think of that smaller step. Like, what are the things that scare you a little bit less, but they're a good step in the direction that you want to take. So I love that visual. And we see that you have identified 5 key avoidance tendencies. I'm really, really curious to hear a little bit more about what these are and how those play a factor in all of this.
Yeah, so that's that. we're really good at avoiding. And the reason you avoid, I mean, it's pretty clear why you avoid, right? Because it's a relief. It's, gosh, oh, phew, I don't have to do that. It's self-protective in a way. But of course, avoidance is kind of like an antidote to growth. You're not going to grow and learn and develop if you avoid. So how do people do it? All sorts of ways. And if you think to yourself, you probably can identify some of these in your own life. So, one's the most obvious, like you simply say no. You just, you decline it. Like me, 20 plus years ago, when I was presented with opportunities to speak in companies, 20 years ago, I felt like I was such an imposter. Like, what would I possibly have to say to these people in these companies? And I just was so kind of overwhelmed about the idea that I would just lie and say, "Oh, no, I'm really sorry. I'm busy on that date." When my calendar was completely open. So that would be like, saying no. Sometimes we avoid by only doing part of a difficult task. So deliver only part of the negative news that you need to deliver. That's an avoidance strategy. Another one might be substituting, but imperfectly substituting. So, for example, for my book Reach, I talk with small business owners, among many other people. And I remember one in particular, he is a travel agent. And for him to build up his business, especially in the world of Expedia and Travelocity and, all the different online travel agencies, if you're going to run like a little one-person travel agency, you really need to build up a customer base that knows you and trusts you. And that means a lot of face-to-face work. Now, the problem is that this guy was very uncomfortable promoting himself and making small talk with people he didn't know. And it was very awkward to him. So that really presented a conflict, because to build his business, he needed to do that, but he was really scared to do it. So what he did is he avoided. He substituted. He said, "You know what? I'm just going to post on Facebook. I'm just going to send out an email blast," which, by the way, those aren't bad things, but in his case, it was an imperfect substitution. Sometimes we procrastinate. We tinker and tinker and tinker and tinker before trying something or putting something out in the world, when the reality is that, it might actually be more effective to put whatever it is out there earlier to get that critical feedback, so that ultimately you can come up with something better and more effective and so on. And there are many other ways. We rationalize, like, we say to ourselves, it's not that important that I do whatever it is, when, to achieve your goals, to grow and develop and learn, it might very well be important, but we rationalize and say it's not. So, those are some, and I think all of us have them, me included.
Wow. That is, yes, I feel like
I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh, guilty. Oh,
I know, I'm thinking of all the places, right? It's like immediately, I'm sure all of our listeners too, we're all thinking of all the places that where this type of avoidance is playing in our lives. And okay, so awareness, right? Awareness is, I assume, the first step. So what do we do next, given once we have the awareness of these avoidance strategies that we might be activating in our lives?
Yeah, well, that's avoidance is important. I'm sorry, avoidance is important. That's a Freudian slip.
Yes, yay.
Oh, all right, there you go. All right, and awareness is important. I think the next step is to discover kind of what your I call them kind of pain points, or your psychological roadblocks, what's holding you back. I think that's another really sensible thing to do. And in my book, I talk about 5 different sort of psychological challenges. Like, in other words, if you kind of dig in, why are you afraid? Why are you avoiding? It might be you feel inauthentic. Maybe this, whatever it is, it just doesn't feel like you. This thing you're considering doing, stepping outside your comfort zone, and when something feels inauthentic, it very well might cause us to avoid it because it's very uncomfortable. Maybe we're afraid of I call it the likability challenge. Maybe we're worried that people won't like this version of us if we're changing and developing and stepping outside our comfort zones. What if people don't like it? Right? What if we don't like it? Competence. What if we're bad at it? What if other people see we're bad at it? That's a real threat. Resentment. Maybe you feel resentment. Maybe you feel frustrated that, yes, I know I have to do this thing to grow and learn and develop and do whatever I want to do next, but it's frustrating that I have to. I wish I didn't have to. Now, logically, you might know you do have to, but you might be frustrated that you have to. And then finally, morality. And this one doesn't as much, but it does come up sometimes. I start my book Reach with a story about a young woman who has a startup. She started a company, and very soon she realizes she has to fire her best friend. Talk about a morality challenge. So you got authenticity, you got likability, you got competence, you got resentment, you got morality. So where's your pain point or pain points? Like where's your fear coming from? I think that's the first step in starting to learn to step outside your comfort zone.
That makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was especially intrigued by the likability tendency, because I think we've been hearing a lot about that lately, and just in terms of self-judgment, and and when you mentioned, like, are you going to be happy with this version of yourself? Are other people going to be happy with this version of yourself that is different from the comfortable version? And even in your global dexterity book, your subtitle is how to adapt your behavior across cultures without losing yourself in the process. And I just think all of these things are very important in this day and age where we have so many channels to share. We share about what we're up to. We share about who we are. And kind of in this process, we may be stepping out of our comfort zones and sharing a version of ourselves that we're not necessarily comfortable with sharing yet. And what kind of are your thoughts on not losing yourself in the process of stepping out of your comfort zone, and what you would advise people who are feeling a little maybe timid in this area? And I'm not saying that the version of yourself that is stepped out of their comfort zone, that version is not bad, right? But it's uncomfortable, right? And that's kind of why we might avoid it.
Yeah, it's new, it's scary, it's different. It's uncertain, right? On one side of it, you haven't tried it yet, so you don't have the experience of knowing that. You couldn't know that. So yeah, so that so that's what I was curious about. That's the question of like how to do this successfully was like the big part of what I was interested in, because ultimately I'm in this for trying to help people. That's my goal. So I should say that for this book I did a lot of research. I spoke with small business owners, entrepreneurs, managers, and then I expanded it: lawyers, doctors, police officers, therapists, actors, students, priests, rabbis, all sorts of people in all sorts of situations where they were considering stepping outside their comfort zone. And what I found is it boiled down essentially to three things. In terms of being able to be more successful. The first is conviction. That's a deep sense of purpose in why this is important to you, why this is worthy to you, why you are willing to actually do this. Maybe it's the right thing for you to do. Maybe it's the necessary thing. Maybe it will make you feel good about yourself. Maybe this will help enable you to help others. Maybe you feel it's your calling. Maybe you have a goal of being an entrepreneur, a small business owner, and you've always wanted that. Whatever it is, and this is very personal, but whatever it is, find it, embrace it, use it, because that conviction, that's your fuel. And by the way, if you can't find a source of conviction, that's a big clue as well. Maybe this is not the right time. Maybe this is not the right situation. So, but conviction, that would be the first resource, I would say, that's critical. And I talk a lot about this in the book, about how to find it and so on. But conviction's number one. Shall I continue?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so customization's number two. Now, customization's super cool. I think this is like one of the most interesting things I found in my research. This is like the idea of like, here's a metaphor. Going to like buying a suit, buying a dress, buying whatever it is, and having it fit pretty well but not perfectly, and then going to a tailor and having it tailored to fit you just right. So if you think about that as a metaphor and then apply that to stepping outside your comfort zone, there are ways that you can tweak your situation. You can tweak what you're doing to have it fit you just a little bit better. And that hits, by the way, the authenticity piece that you were talking about before, about, doing something without losing yourself in the process. The way to do that is to inject yourself into the process. And then, and there are a lot of ways you can do that. You can do that. I mean, I could give you some concrete examples, but some categories of things, body language, like a prop, like an actual physical prop you can bring to a situation. I can give you some good, fun examples of those. You can play with timing. You can stage the context. You can even tweak your language. There are many things you can do. So I'll give you a couple examples. One example. In fact, a reader sent me this example. So it's not even in the book. She sent me this example. She said, "I love your book, and I have to tell you, this customization tool for stepping outside my comfort zone was so helpful." And her solution was this: she was kind of shy, and she'd go to parties, and she'd have a very hard time connecting with people and meeting people, and so she'd kind of just be in the corner, and wouldn't really have much of a good time. But she really wanted to be social. And so she had this great solution of customization, and it has to do with a prop. And so what she did is she actually brought a selfie stick to these social get-togethers. And so she'd bring a selfie stick, and like people would look at it and they're like, "What's that?" And she'd say, "It's a selfie stick." And like everyone knows what a selfie stick, most people know what a selfie stick is, but some people don't know what it looks like, And so like she's like, "Yeah, no, it's a selfie stick. Here, look." And then they would say, "Oh, cool." And they'd take out their smartphone, and she would show them how to use it. And then all of a sudden, by the way, at this point, she's starting to feel really natural and comfortable, almost like the expert in this little situation. And then she can be a little bit more herself, and it starts a conversation, and they do something together. They take a picture and maybe even exchange emails and so on. And so the point here is that with this little prop, this little tool, she has customized the situation so that it fits her and it enables her to do something she was never able to do before. That's customization in action. Just one little example.
So cool.
That's so cool.
I love it.
Yeah, so that's customization. Clarity is the last tool, I would say. And what clarity is oftentimes when we're stepping outside our comfort zone or considering it, our emotions get the best of us, and especially our negative emotions. Like we start to worry. Psychologists call it catastrophizing. We think about like worst case scenarios. If I'm going to give a speech, I'm just going to, I'm going to faint on stage. I'm going to look like a total fool, and therefore I'm not going to do it. But what clarity is it's trying to it's almost like, I like to use metaphors. It's almost like a ship at sea, kind of a rough sea, kind of moving back and forth. And clarity is the anchor. It anchors you emotionally. Now, instead of saying, I'm going to give the worst speech ever, or by the way, you can go to the opposite extreme and say, I'm only going to give a speech if I'm like the best TED talker ever or something like that. What clarity is saying, it's capturing that middle ground. It's saying, you know what? Probably not going to be the best TED talker ever. I'm probably not going to totally wow the crowd my first time out, but I'm probably not going to faint either. I'm probably going to be somewhere in between. I'll have some high points and some lower points. I'll learn a lot, and I'll bet you next time I'll do even better. That's clarity. And I found that people who were able to have that more reasoned outlook and perspective on their situation were more successful at stepping outside their comfort zone.
Wow, so awesome. I mean, this is just those three things: conviction, customization, and clarity. I just love that framework. And I feel like we could talk with you about this forever, but we definitely want to encourage people to go and get the book, Reach. And if we can, we'd love to shift the conversation now to a little bit about, as productivity time and energy coaches, we are just fascinated by people that are, getting a lot of things done in the same 24 hours that everybody has. And I mean, the amount of writing that you do, we'd love to hear what your day looks like and when you're getting your writing done and how you balance, work and life and all the things.
Yeah, well, I get up at 3 a.m. No, just kidding.
Everyone just tuned out like, oh, that's not for me.
No, I actually know someone who does that. No, I definitely do not do that. Gosh, I don't know. In terms of productivity, I'm actually a pretty fast writer. I think that helps me. But what I do is in terms of productivity, I keep a log in sort of a file in a diary of ideas, even half-baked ideas. And sometimes I'll bake them halfway. I'll stop on them if I don't feel like I'm making progress, but then I'll go back to them. And I find that that's really useful because it gives me nuggets of ideas that I can sort of like cultivate at a time when I feel like I'm a little bit more productive instead of sort of throwing in the towel at that point. I'm pretty good at knowing when I'm productive and knowing when I'm less productive and then sort of like managing that successfully. I know a lot of people who say, I'm going to work today, 9 to 1 on this thing or whatever. And it's just not like, it's not working, but they still sort of like, suck it up and try to make that time, but really not get much done. To me, it would be way better in that circumstance if I knew that I wasn't being productive to go take a walk with my dog, to go get a coffee or go meditate or whatever my thing happens to be, and then come back at it at a better time. I'm also pretty good at leveraging when I am productive. So there are times when I just have the sense of flow and I am just really writing well. And I'll make sure that if I had something, let's say I'm really, on a roll, I might cancel an appointment that I have that might be soon after because I know I really want to leverage that productive time I have. So kind of being conscious and aware of your own state and when you're kind of at your best, and then kind of managing your time accordingly. That's a big kind of hack that I use, I would say, in my own life.
Yeah, I love that answer.
Speaking our language, man.
And what tools do you use to write? Are you writing online, offline? Where do you keep your notes and your little half-baked ideas? Is that what you call them?
Yeah. Oh no, just like on a Word file. No, I have no fancy technology, although I actually occasionally I write. I use a pencil and a notepad. Like I go old school.
Oh wow! What's that?
Exactly. Like try to mix it up a little bit, but just like a Word document. No, I don't have any fancy tools really to do much of anything. I think. I actually speaking of like tools, just a couple of years ago, I went away from a digital calendar to a paper calendar. So I use a paper calendar. Don't know if that impacts my productivity, but I like doing it.
Well, it sounds like using a Word doc or even pen and paper are definitely strategies for keeping distractions away. So I think that's an amazing hack and probably the best tool that we could use, right? That's great.
No, that's true. Distractions, that it's that is another thing actually. So I do try to I'm very conscious about what locations are least distracting for me. And I'll try to work in those locations. That's another thing.
Smart.
It's really smart. Yeah. Next level question on this one. So obviously, like from your writing, just reading your writing, you are a brilliant writer, and that is your unique brilliance for sure. And you also are just a really savvy kind of modern business person. Like your website's very clean, lots of opportunities to engage with you, lots of opportunity to collect contact information. And I am really curious. So you love to write, obviously. That's definitely a priority for you. What are some of the things that you have learned to either outsource or automate, and how has that changed your productivity game?
So I learned, it's a good question. So I learned, sort of the hard way that like being an author today, and not just an author, I'm starting to become more of an entrepreneur. So for example, I'm creating an online course about stepping outside your comfort zone that I'm going to be launching in January. So like, that's like based on everything we're talking about. So that's super cool, and I'm really excited about it. And so that's sort of, I'm branching out in that direction. But in terms of tools, automated tools, what I've realized the hard way, as I was going to say, is that you can't just sort of like press send on an article and that's that, and everyone's like, oh wow, I can't wait for his next article, I'm gonna go read it. Right? It's not, you have to build up a social media presence. Now I'm kind of old here. I didn't like grow up like my kids are like, bathed in social media. It's like attached to their hand. But I didn't grow up with that, so I've learned it. I've learned how to do it. I've learned to like it. I've learned to customize it, just like I talked about before. And I also set up, as you said, I offer sort of gifts, so to speak, to people so that they can download I have a cool cheat sheet for the top 10 cultures around the world, like the cultural code for these top 10 cultures. And I created that. I want to create something like of super value for people. And to download it, you offer your email address to me, and then that becomes part of my email list. And I try to really send people on my email list cool stuff. Like I send emails, I don't know, every couple of weeks, but cool, useful stuff. And, if you're not interested, you're not interested. Maybe you'll unsubscribe. I hope people stay and keep in the conversation and so on. But that process is automated, right? So that's an automated process to build my email list and so on, and to keep it. And when I send out an email to, thousands and thousands of people now, that's totally it's not I write the email, but I have a system to, collect and save the addresses and so on and so forth. So that's a bit of automation.
Nice.
Cool. Well, gosh, we will certainly include all of this information in our show notes and where people can find you at andymolinsky.com. They can get that super cool download, which we also got and love. So thank you for that. And so we'll include everything, but do you have any final thoughts for our listeners and maybe a first step that they might be able to take in getting into their stretch zone?
Yeah. Well, first step, choose a situation. Think of something that can be a small win for you. Don't think of if you're I don't know, gosh, let's see. If you're so I was talking with someone the other day who knows that they need to start networking, but is terrified of doing it. Well, can you start small? Can you sign up for LinkedIn? Now, you don't have to put up your profile yet, but can you just sign up for LinkedIn? That's not that hard. You can do that, right? So if you go in little steps, little sort of slow steps, one at a time, I think and have like little small win and accomplishments at each point in time. I think that's a cool strategy to, achieve an ultimate objective, as opposed to thinking to yourself, I got to accomplish this huge thing right away. That's kind of a recipe for avoidance and probably a lack of success.
Love it. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. And we appreciate you and your time.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks, Andy. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed our interview with Andy. You can find all the info for this show at bestlifeever.buzz/episode 79. And we have a special announcement for you.
We are so excited to announce our new Time and Energy Mastery digital program. We've been working so hard on a productivity, time, and energy training that you can do in the comfort of your own home. We give you all the tools you need to level up your productivity in your work and your life. This includes worksheets, downloads, strategies, and access to us. Work smarter without even having to put your pants on, baby. Go to bestlifeever.buzz/productivity and jump in today.